Hi, my name's Bill Perry. I'm an aquatic biologist, and I'm working on the IPREFER USDA-funded CAP grant to look at the ecosystem services of pennycress, or covercress, as a cover crop. Now, my interest in cover crops and the ecosystems they serve are primarily focused around protecting water quality. As an aquatic ecologist, you might expect that. So my goal is to understand how cover crops keep the nutrients in the field, keep the sediments in the field, and out of these streams. I want to protect the biodiversity, the water quality, and the downstream conditions in these streams. You can see these streams are very nice and clear. They're really nice, sandy, in some cases gravelly bottoms. There's an amazing fish diversity even in these streams, as well as freshwater clams. Now, what farmers do in the fields has a direct effect on water quality. And there's a couple ways that we can protect water quality. And my goal in using cover crops, primarily, is the ecosystem services they provide benefit both the water quality and they benefit the farmer in the long run, and possibly in the short run, as we're learning with covercress or pennycress. I'll use pennycress from now on. Now, one of the problems in Central Illinois, or one of the main issues we deal with in terms of the nutrients we're losing from our fields, is they're coming from tiles. If you look down here, this subsurface drainage, this is what an old-fashioned tile looks like. It's clay. You can see there's an old wood plank below it to prevent erosion. These tiles were put in beginning in the mid-1800s by hand. They're about 3 feet long, buried about 3 feet deep, and farmers put in enough of these tiles in the late 1800s in just Illinois to circle the globe 6 times at the equator. We're now putting in a lot more subsurface drainage, and that kind of drainage, if we look down here, is polycarbonate or plastic pipes that are perforated. You can see some of those down here. That's one of the output tiles, and what happens is nutrients that are applied to the field, if there's nothing holding them in place and we're not using nitrification inhibitors, a lot of the anhydrous ammonia or nitrogen is converted to nitrate. That nitrate flows down through the soil into the tiles and goes directly to the stream. And in these streams, we have nitrate levels that are almost always higher than the drinking water standards according to the EPA, and we commonly see 20 milligrams of nitrate nitrogen per liter. And the question is, how do we limit the amount of nitrogen entering these streams and maintain productivity for the farmers? And that's my goal in ecosystem services. Now, one of the approaches to protecting our water quality, and I apologize for the wind, it's always windy out here, is edge of field practices, or some best management practices. You can see behind me is a nice wide buffer strip, and this buffer strip, in theory, would retain nutrients before they get to the stream, except the tiles bypass that. We can also use things like bioreactors, wetlands, or saturated buffers. And our farm at ISU has put in this saturated buffer assembly here, where water comes in, it's diverted out of this box in these 3 chambers into tiles that go off into the buffer. It saturates the buffer, reducing nutrient loss to the stream because natural biological processing removes the nitrate. These edge of field practices are excellent. They're very effective. The issue is, especially in Central Illinois, we have so many tiles that implementing them at scale is very difficult, but they are quite effective. You can see behind me, we have a field that is fallow up through the spring till we start planting, and it has nothing growing on it. So the only thing that's limiting the loss of nitrogen through that soil profile is nitrification inhibitors, and that often isn't enough, and we're losing a lot of nitrogen, and we're also losing a lot of soil from the wind that you can see now. So the question is, what do we do to limit that? Now, what we propose, or what's now being used but not adopted at a wide scale, are cover crops. If you look over here, you can see a really nice stand of cereal rye. This cereal rye, although there doesn't look like there's a lot of biomass here, most of the biomass is in the root zone. And this grass will take up a lot of nitrogen during the spring when we lose most of the nitrogen through our tiles, hold it in place, and decompose, releasing it back to the crops, and also increase soil organic carbon, reduce wind and water erosion, and by increasing soil organic carbon, we end up increasing the fertility of the soil over time and holding more water. So those are the ecosystem services: reduce erosion, hold nutrients, increase soil organic carbon, increase soil fertility. It takes years to do this, and it works really well with cereal rye. Now you might ask yourself, why isn't everybody using cereal rye? There's a couple issues. One is that it takes money to plant the seed and buy the seed, even though termination costs are lower because this biomass prevents a lot of weeds. You see almost no weeds in this plant biomass here except for cereal rye. So it is a great set of ecosystem services, but it's a cost to the farmer. How do we have a crop, a cover crop, that doesn't cost the farmer money and in fact can make money and still provide many of those ecosystem services? And that's what I'll talk to you soon about with the pennycress. Now, the goal of cover crops is to retain soil nutrients, retain soils from wind erosion and water erosion, increase soil organic carbon, reduce weeds if possible, and not cost the farmer anything. So the goal is some kind of winter crop that we can harvest and make money on and still provide the ecosystem services of something like cereal rye. And what you see behind me is a field of pennycress, and we've got over in the white over here, we're sampling soil pore water. We're looking at the amount of weeds that are associated with this cover crop relative to other cover crops, how good it is at reducing the weed biomass, and how good it is at limiting nutrients lost from the fields through subsurface drainage. And what we've done is individually tiled 2-acre plots, and we have pennycress and reference plots. We also have a nitrogen added plot to see how pennycress takes up the added nitrogen we might put on early in the season and increase biomass of pennycress seed. So what we're looking at here is pennycress. This year we have a fair number more weeds than we've had in the past. That will change rapidly as the biomass of spring germinated pennycress comes on. And you can see out here, here's our pennycress field, and that plot up there is our reference plot with no weeds in it. And we'll be looking at the loss of tile water or subsurface drainage leaving these plots out through those chambers over there. We have something called an agri-drain or a tile interceptor, that intercepts the water flowing through the tiles and allows us to sample how much water is leaving and the nutrient content that's in that water. So we'll have a good idea of how good this crop functions as a cover crop relative to other studies that have been published in this area on cereal rye and some of the other common cover crops. And pennycress growing here, you can see where it is growing really well. It actually limits the number of weeds like henbit here that can cause some issues. And this biomass is fall germinated. This will flower until it gets warm out and it will self-terminate. So there's no you don't need to terminate pennycress after it's done because it will do it so on its own. So this is what we're doing in our ecosystem services, is understanding how this crop functions as a cover crop. And again, this is the IPREFER project, a USDA funded capacity grant.